Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast, in which we answer questions and complaints from our audience. That's you guys. It's for our edification as well as yours. We hope we all learned something here. Let's just dive right in. We're going to get something from Marie Boardman, 8542. Ron, please give a shout out to Guy Boardman, my dad. He is your number one fan. You are like a part of our family in our house on YouTube. From South Africa. Well, you are more than welcome. Guy. Guy, this is a shout out to you. Thanks so much for listening in from South Africa. We love our South African listeners and viewers, and we are always pleased to hear from you guys. You give us some good information on what's going on in that country. In fact, if I remember right, we've got another one coming up in here. Someone from South Africa is telling us about cartridges that are pretty commonly used there by the locals. That'll be fun to find out. But before we go there, I have to do another shout out, and this one goes to my old hunting partner, the old pheasant hunting partner of back in South Dakota, Greg. He wanted to give a shout out to his daughter, Amelia. And Greg tells me that Amelia is quite the young huntress and fisherman. She really loves to deer hunt with her dad, pheasant hunt, work the Labrador, and catch some really big walleyes from the pictures I've been seeing. So here's to you, Amelia. I look forward to meeting you soon. Keep up the good hunting and fishing. Now here is from McGowan. 99.99%, this is a scientific survey, of people out there are not ethical. Hunting is hunting, no matter how far or close you are. Without the rangefinders and the CDS scopes, hardly anyone could kill a deer at 600 yards. Plus, apparently at 600 yards, the heart-beating thrill isn't happening when someone is that far away. Because you have to set up a rest and range the target and dial the scope in and have someone put the information into their phone to see how to set the scope. Plus, there are lots of calibers that run out of killing energy at 600 yards. Some of them are really popular, too. Well, to each his own, but I'm not shooting a game animal past 400 yards. And I know with a good rest, I can kill a game animal that far. I'd much rather get half that distance, though. I do not like to track a deer, and I don't think I'm going to find it. All of my rifles will kill a big game animal at 400 yards without holding over or anything. I load my own for all of them. It used to be that in the West there was a saying that the first shot you aim on the hare. Learn to judge distance and get a rangefinder. Most people shoot over, not under deer. Any decent flat shooting caliber will kill a deer from the end of the barrel out to 400 yards without aiming anywhere but center of the shoulder. If 3 inches high at 100 yards, anyway. At least mine do. Ask Aram von Benedict and that young lady if 600 yards is an ethical range or not. Let the true snipers shoot targets at that range, not game, and I am not one of them. So, all right, McGowan, we appreciate that. I wrote back and I said, hey, McGowan, I applaud you for knowing your range limitations and always shooting game ethically. However, to avoid confusing others and possibly wounding game, I must take exception with your statement that any decent flat shooting caliber will kill without needing to hold over out to 400 yards if you 3 inches high at 100. So let's set up a 7mm Remington Magnum, a fairly well-known flat shooting Magnum, and we'll use a 160 grain Accubon bullet, and we'll drive at 3,000 feet per second. The BC of that sleek bullet is about .531. That's pretty high. Zero it 3.13 inches high at 100 yards, and at 400 yards, your drop is 11.7 inches. The average deer's chest is between 15 and 18 inches. So let's be generous, and we'll use 18 inches. Of that, a top inch is probably lost to hair, to hide and muscle, and then about 2 inches on the bottom is going to be brisket meat and bone. So that leaves us with a vital zone of 15 inches on a really big deer, and that's being generous. So aim that one dead center, and you have 7.5 inches of drop before your bullet leaves the vital zone. Well, that 7mm bullet in our example will drop 4 inches lower than this. I get your drift, but I use maximum point blank range myself, and doing so requires us to be accurate in our measurements and not make broad assumptions. It is possible to stretch MPBR to 400 yards with a handful of Magnum cartridges, but not many. So just a cautionary tale for everyone. I think I agree with McGowan here that you should shoot within your known limitations. For him, 400 yards. I respect that. But don't just assume that your rifle is going to be able to shoot dead flat with a center hold. You really need to test it. You can run your ballistic tables, but then get in the field, get on the range, and make some tests so you know exactly what's happening.
Was he talking about Aaron Von Benedict?
Oh, that comment he made about Aaron Von Benedict and the young lady. Yes, there was an incident about a year ago during deer season in which an outdoor rider shot at a deer that someone else had shot at, a young married woman, and he claims he didn't know the deer was shot or whatever, but both of them were shooting too far away is the basis of the story. It's just they were shooting at 700 yards, if I got the data right, and both of them hit the deer, wounded it, and tracked it down and finished it off, and there was just a big stink about the whole project, but the upshot of the whole thing was don't shoot at game beyond sensible ranges, and that won't happen.
And that is not our Joseph Von Benedict, who is his brother. That's
yeah, a lot of people get that mixed up, and they folks just like to get online and run other people down and condemn them for this, that, and the other thing, and you don't even have the right person a lot of times. So Joseph Von Benedict does videos for us, and he is not this individual on that incident. It's just not fair for folks to call him out and say that he's some kind of a deer poacher and he shoots deer too far away and all the rest of it. So I like folks to be accurate and just resist that sort of online condemnation.
Except if they're talking about you.
Pardon?
Except if they're talking about you.
Yeah, if you're talking about me, let her rip, guys, because I'm sticking it out there, hanging it out for everybody to let me know when I mess up. Lord knows I'm far from perfect. Now, this is from Heinrich. He writes, I thought I would give you a little insight regarding the actual rifles used in Africa. This is the one I remember. Most every farmer owns a 222 or 223 Remington or a 243 Winchester and, of course, a 22 rimfire. They originally bought those to teach their children how to shoot, but they usually fall in love with these rifles themselves, and then they continue to use them most of the time on all the antelope, including kudu, just because this rifle is almost always in the back of the truck. They hunt for the farm workers and for themselves when there is an opportunity, so it's usually meat for the pot. They won't take stupid shots, and they won't waste meat because it's a valuable resource and because tomorrow is another day and could get a better shot. Then there are the 303 British, the 303 Winchester, and the 30-06, sometimes a 270 Winchester. Usually these are passed down from a previous generation. These are taken out of the safe for special occasions, for example, when the family visits or they're going to go hunt something specific. But usually they're a backup or a borrow rifle. For far shooting in the Kalahari, usually for springbuck, the above calibers are loaded with light grain bullets. Lastly, there is the 375 H&H Magnum. This is used for everything else, including lions, buffalo, elephant, hippo, and giraffe. The 300 Win Mag was never popular because it damages the meat too much because it's so fast. As you, I also like the caliber, but it's just not popular here at all. So, yes, it is always a giggle if hunters from abroad visit Africa with all the fancy guns and calibers and loads and bullets. And when they shoot horrible shots where the professional hunter usually has to save their behind, and usually with a gun that the PH hardly ever uses. If the PH carries a 414 or a 458 or a 505, I promise you they hardly ever use it themselves. To shoot something with honor and dignity and with good shot placement so the animal does not suffer too much with as little meat damage and wastage as possible, that demands a lot of respect. As a general rule, keep your big mouth shut after you have taken a life. Respect the animal. This is not a let's have the party now affair. Long story short, most men in Africa only use the above-mentioned guns. I hope this helps. Thanks for everything that you do. Love your channel. Well, thank you for that information, Heinrich. I might take exception with a few things you say here. One is your 414. I guess you just have a typo and you mean the 404 Jeffrey with that one, and the 458 Lot or Win Mag on the other one, and the 505 Gibbs. And I can't I can't say that I've noticed PHs don't know how to shoot those rifles. The ones that I have worked with are pretty darn good at handling the rifle and making their shots. And then the claim that we visiting hunters are terrible shots and we wound stuff all the time. I haven't seen that to be the case either. Certainly it happens. Gosh, you have to know that. But I have been with PHs on several hunts who said they were really impressed with the shooting abilities of most of their American hunters. They told me that it just seems that these guys who come over, like me, really value the opportunity and practice and train to be good at it. And of course, you've got to factor in the cost. If you're going to go over there, spend that kind of time and money, you want to be able to hit what you're shooting at. So most of us train to be pretty effective shots. Of course, there's always the exception to the rule, but I don't think we can be condemning all the visiting hunters as being inept. And then your point about the locals waiting for the perfect shot is perfectly valid, and it makes sense. You can get away with a light caliber like that if you wait for the perfect opportunity. Whereas someone coming over for a week or two, you might get one good chance at a kudu and have to take him at a little bit farther distance than the 223 would be effective on and that sort of thing. So you need to take that into account as well. But do appreciate your honesty there, Heinrich. All right, let's see. This is Norman, 1155. He asks, which penetrates better, a round nose or a spire point? I wrote him back and I said, neither. Bullet nose shape has little to do with penetration except when you're shooting solids. The greater the nose ogive or the curve, the greater the chance that a non-deformed bullet will veer off course. This happens because of variable friction or pressure on that coned surface. A flat-nosed front tends to balance those frictions and maintain a straight-line penetration. This is of value for brain-shooting elephants and reaching the heart and lung through a large body mass, such as on an elephant, a hippo, a rhino, or a Cape buffalo. Penetration of expanding bullets varies due more to the materials and the construction than the shape. A hard bullet expands minimally, so it penetrates farther than an expanding bullet that encounters more tissue, thus more friction. So the more mass that a bullet retains, the more momentum it retains, and the deeper it penetrates. Okay, I hope that helped out there. That was Norman 1155. So don't worry too much about the shape of the bullet for penetration as the construction of the bullet, unless you're going for that straight line penetration with the solid. And then the flat nose with minimal ogive is the way to go. All right, let's see. This is Mark. Oh, Mark is describing a bench leg deer out in Oregon that he saw or he shot right near the Pacific coast, and he claims it is strange because it weighs 220 pounds, and that's way bigger than most of the blacktails along the coast there. And he wonders if that might be the bench leg deer, or maybe he says it is the bench leg deer. We've had a few comments about this bench leg deer, which is essentially some kind of a hybrid between a mule deer and a black-tailed deer that they find in parts of Oregon closer to the coast. And folks are wondering exactly what it is, and I suspect it is some kind of a cross. Here is what I wrote back to Mark. Let's see if I was on schedule here or if I got it wrong. I say, yes, indeed, Mark, I believe we humans make too much of variability in wildlife sizes and colors and shapes. These things were used long ago to justify many, many more species so that they could be named for their discoverers. There is more about self-aggrandizement than science. Those taxonomists were known as splitters, and the opposite were known as lumpers, who, the DNA now proves, were more often right. These days, we can DNA test wildlife and prove such things as bench leg deer are more about localized genetic traits than species differentiation. Another thing we should know is that habitat can change animal physiology or their conformation, the body conformation. Decades ago, they introduced some Rocky Mountain elk into the Northwest, where it's Roosevelt elk country, and what they observed after several years was that those Rocky Mountain elk took on the same characteristics of body size and antler conformation as the Roosevelt elk, even though their DNA was purely mountain elk from Colorado or Montana, wherever they came from, the Rocky Mountain version of elk. So that just suggested that it was the habitat that was making these changes. Available forage was driving the changes. An interesting thing happens with caribou that were introduced to New Zealand long ago. What they found was that the preponderance of the shovels, now the antler of a caribou usually has a shovel on one side or the other, and that's the initial tine coming out, the brow tine. And usually it's more often on the left or the right, I forget which, up in Canada and Alaska. But when they sent them to New Zealand after a few generations, it switched. It went flop to the other side. It might have to do with the Coriolis effect or something. But it's a response of that animal's physiology to its habitat, the living conditions where it is. So my point is that stuff like this happens in nature, but it doesn't mean that there's a new species. All interesting stuff, and it's fun to speculate. Oh, one more thing. Wildlife is free to migrate. So there's no reason why a lost mule deer couldn't have wandered in from, say, the sage slopes of western Nevada, gone over the mountains and through the woods, and ended up on the California coast where Mark shot it. By the way, moose are often seen way down in Nebraska and even Kansas from time to time. So there you go. All right, here is Kiki. The 270 Winchester is much more effective hunting cartridge than the Target cartridge 6.5 Creedmoor due to superior external ballistics. So many out there have been marketed to believe otherwise. Well, the very best of all is the grand old 30-06. Nothing beats it. Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm there, Kiki, and you're going to get a lot of support from the 30-06 people as well as the 270. You know, if you want to get pinched, say something bad about the 30-06. I've done a few tongue-in-cheek things on the 30-06 going obsolete or not being as popular anymore, and oh boy, do I catch static on that one. Don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not saying the 30-06 is a useless cartridge. What I have observed, though, doing this is, if you make fun of someone's mother or girlfriend or spouse, I'm not too happy about it. And if you run down their dog, they're really unhappy. But if you run down their cartridge, you are just about thrown into the toilet. You just stepped in it big time. People, we just really love our rifles and cartridges, and we stand by them. So no offense to anybody with any cartridge. I always say, whatever cartridge you like, whatever works for you is the best cartridge for you to use. But that doesn't mean that it is the best in the world, as so many people say. The very best of all is a grand old 30-06. Well, Kiki, maybe for you it is. But if you really look at the science and the physics, not true, obviously. So you've got a 30-06. It shoots 30 caliber bullets, .3008 inch in diameter, right? And it shoots them at a certain velocity. It can't go any faster than that, top end velocity. Put more powder behind it in a case like the 300 Win Mag, and you've now added maybe 300 feet per second of velocity to it. So it's got to be superior if energy on target, reach down range, and minimum wind deflection and all these things matter. And it pretty much does matter because that's why we choose our cartridges. You don't shoot, say, a 30 carbine, pretty weak little thing, for elk hunting, but you would shoot a 30-06 or a 300 Win Mag or something more powerful, even though they shoot the same diameter bullets. So, here, I wrote back. I better read what I wrote to Kiki. I said, hey, the 270 Winchester is indeed a fine hunting cartridge, but I think it's wise to accurately depict the external ballistics of both it and that 6.5 Creedmoor. So let's do that. Let us shoot a 145 grain ELDX bullet, and that one has a BC of .485, and let's shoot it from a 24-inch barrel 270 Winchester at 3,000 feet per second. And then let's shoot the 143 grain ELDX bullet, which has a BC of .625, from a 24-inch barrel to keep things even on a 6.5 Creedmoor. That one's going to go 2,750 feet per second, and it might even go a little faster, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. And zero both of those for their maximum point-blank range on a 6-inch target. That means the 6.5's maximum point-blank range is going to be 280 yards. The 270s will be 296 yards. So bingo, you've won the race by 16 yards. But what about the wind deflection? At 300 yards, that 6.5 Creedmoor has a 5-inch deflection of the bullet in a 10-mile-an-hour right-angle wind. And the 270 has a 5.8-inch deflection. So now the 6.5 Creedmoor wins. The remaining energy at 300 yards, the 6.5s is 1,725 feet per second. The 270s is 1,913. 270 wins again. You're up on the 6.5 Creedmoor by 2. But what happens at 650 yards? The 6.5's energy is 6 foot-pounds more than the 270's, and its wind deflection is 3 inches less, and its drop is 8 inches more. So that 270 Winchester is indeed the winner out to 300 yards in drop and energy, but the higher BC of that 6.5 Creedmoor bullet gives it the wind advantage, and after 600 yards, it even gives it an energy advantage. All of this tells me I'm going to stick with my trusty old 270 Winchester for most of my hunting because I rarely shoot at game past 300 yards. Do realize, Kiki, that these numbers will change if you alter the bullet's BC and its weight and the velocities and all the rest of this. But these numbers give us a pretty accurate depiction of both cartridges' comparable external ballistic performance. Guys, I always recommend doing these numbers, these ballistics. A lot of you just snort and sniff and say, oh, that's stupid. Let's just go to the real world here and quit doing all these calculations on your ballistic calculators. We know what's going on out there. Well, I'd appreciate that. I know hunters who have always used, say, a 30-06 with a 180 grain bullet for everything, and they always get their game, and they're perfectly satisfied. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that just because it's so great for you that it's the greatest cartridge in the world for everybody else. And it does help to know exactly what they're doing. If you don't like ballistic calculators and all these numbers and the math and everything, you can just go to the range and shoot at 300 yards and 400 yards and see just exactly how much drop you're getting, how much deflection in the wind. It's tough to measure the energy on target at those distances, but again, if it's working for you and you're getting your game, I wouldn't argue against it. All right. Let's see. Oh, here is a funny one. Someone named Max wrote in, and he had one of the shortest comments I have ever gotten. 30-aught ARP. Instead of 30-06, he calls it the 30-aught ARP, AARP, the Association for Retired People. That's pretty clever, Max. I wrote back and I said, pretty creatively funny, Max. It's rather amazing how that old 30-06 hangs around, isn't it? You would think that hunters would be more interested in a 30 caliber that performed a lot better. For instance, we know that the 30-378 Weatherby Magnum can drive a 168 grain bullet 3,370 feet per second, but that requires a 26-inch barrel plus 99 grains of powder. And the recoil in an 8-pound rifle is 44 foot-pounds, and a recoil velocity will be 19 foot-pounds. That's a lot of whack on the shoulder. A more reasonable 300 Winchester Magnum can push that same bullet 3,250 feet per second, but it burns only 79 grains of powder. The recoil is an easier 35 foot-pounds, but how about a 30 caliber that burns just 63 grains of powder to drive that 168 grain bullet 3,000 feet per second from a 24-inch barrel? But it generates just 27 foot-pounds of recoil. Sounds like a little easier to shoot, doesn't it? And it's small enough to fit one more round in the magazine. That one would only hold three rounds for 300 Win Mag. And now that velocity, that 3,000 feet per second with that 168 grain bullet is fast enough for a maximum point blank range of 302 yards on a 6-inch target. That means you can aim dead center on a 6-inch target from the muzzle all the way to 302 yards and still hit that 6-inch target. If you do your part, obviously. And that bullet will remain supersonic out to 800 yards. Some call this particular cartridge I'm describing a 7.62 by 63.3 millimeter, but it's more commonly known as the 30-06 AARP. So if you guys could follow those numbers, obviously what I was doing was doing some comparisons between that old geriatric 30-06 stumbling along and these big super magnums. And of course, the bigger magnums with more powder are going to shoot faster and flatter and all that wonderful stuff. But you're going to have more recoil and a bigger rifle, a heavier rifle, and all the other stuff. So it's always a balancing act, guys. Again, that's why I don't say the 30-06 is the worst or the best, or the 3378 is the best. It's just a lot of different things that impact all of that stuff. So it pays to know what's going on. What do we have from Alberta? Gar. Gar asks, what he says, I have been hunting coyotes for 60 years. Wow, that's a good long time. And I have always pronounced coyote ending in ote, not ote. I believe that's Spanish. I have heard you pronounce it both ways. Anyway, which is correct and why? Yeah, I don't think there's a correct and why, partner. I think if you're Spanish, you say coyote, and if you want to say it coyote, you can do that. Coyote, and you can say yote, you can say coyote. Where I grew up in the plains of South Dakota, we say coyote. It's like, ooh, there's a coyote. But then I started hunting down south with some Texans, and it was coyote or coyote. So I'll say it any which way. We all know what we're talking about, and it's all kind of fun. But yeah, it seems like up north, from South Dakota on up, it's coyote. No, it's coyote. But I've got one friend who calls them coats. Yeah, it's just abbreviated coyote. We don't want to make it too many syllables, so we'll just go coat. Okay. You know what some people say? Call them anything, just call them close. All right, let's go way down to Louisiana, where I don't know what they call them in Louisiana. Any of you folks down in the bayous, what do you call coyotes? Probably wet. Taylor from Louisiana. Hey, Ron, recently I have found a Thompson Center Icon rifle chambered in the 30TC. I'm interested in it. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on this cartridge and rifle? Thanks for your time. Oh, boy. You know, I was never fully enamored of that rifle. If I remember right, I think, don't hold me to this, but I think I used one in Africa on a hunt once and in 7 rem mag, and it performed beautifully. I was taking game with, I don't think I missed anything. Took impalas and bush buck and a kudu, all kinds of stuff. Worked great. The only real problem I had with it, I had broken one of the mounts trying to put the scope on. I had to get different mounts or something like that. But yeah, ask around. Since I just don't have minimal experience with the darn things, I don't know. But it seemed like that one was awfully accurate. Now, that 30TC is an interesting cartridge, and I think TC went to Hornady, I don't know how many years ago, 10, 12, and I think they just kind of wanted to have their own cartridge. I can't really understand why they did this, but at any rate, it's like a shortened 308. It's about 1/4 of an inch overall length shorter than the 308 Winchester. And I don't know if that's because their rifle was built so that it would have a little bit shorter action and or shorter magazine or what. But what they wanted was to get 30-06 velocities out of it, which strikes me as why would you go with a shorter case capacity and do that? But they achieved it by using the Superformance powders from Hornady. I guess this was around the time Hornady was developing these Superformance powders. So when the rifle came out and they were saying it's a little bit smaller than a 308 Winchester, but it shoots within a few feet per second of the 30-06, well, boy, that sounds pretty hot. But I don't know if it was ever chambered in anything but that TC Icon rifle. So what you're going to get, if you can find the ammunition, that's another issue. I think the only one who ever loaded it was Hornady. You'll probably have to hand load. And if I remember right, on hand loads, Hornady said without having Superformance powder, you could come within about 50 feet per second. So you'll end up with, I think, about a 308 Winchester performance out of this thing. But as I say, it's just the cartridge itself is just a little bit shorter. Overall length is like 2.6 something, whereas the 308 is 2.8 something inches. But not a lot different, pretty simple to load and all the rest. So I think if you can get a good price on it and you're a hand loader and you can find some brass to work with, Or maybe, gosh, I don't know, I haven't looked. Does Hornady still load that ammunition? If they do, then there's really no problem. Okay, so good luck with that. Taylor, do me a favor. If you do pick that thing up and play around with it and can remember, write back and let me know how it's going. How well does that rifle work? Did you find ammunition? All the good stuff, and we'll share that with everybody. All right, Ron from Georgia. I really enjoy your YouTube channel. Thank you, Ron. For straight wall rifle whitetail hunting, it seems the 360 buckhammer is a good choice. I'll agree with that. My question is, which rifle brand and caliber and cartridge selection would you recommend for whitetail hunting? I find in years past many out-of-the-box rifles do not have the best grouping. Any advice is most appreciated. Boy, Ron, you are opening a real can of worms here, because you're going to get 100 different opinions from folks on this one, because one man's perfect whitetail rifle is not the other man's perfect whitetail rifle. And the reason is there's the variety of habitats in which we hunt. If you're hunting in some really, really thick country where you rarely get a shot past 50 yards, 30-30 will work just fine. You want a fairly short rifle that you can maneuver easily in thick brush with. If you're out west, where we've got surprisingly a lot of whitetails and big ones, you're often shooting more like mule deer country. And 300, 400-yard shots are kind of standard stuff. So there you want a longer barrel, flatter trajectories, faster velocities, and all that stuff. I think a really good compromise, and this one gets brought up a lot, is the 308 Winchester. You've got your 30 caliber. You can shoot it pretty fast and flat, about like a 30-06, and that'll carry well enough for 600-yard shots if you want to go to that range, and I don't recommend it. It's just getting to be too darn far. So that'll cover the waterfront there. The recoil is not so brutal that you won't enjoy shooting it if you're taking 50-yard shots. So why not? I've always said, yeah, I love the 30-30 and the lever action rifles that shoot it, but boy, come out of the woods to an open meadow and you see a deer out there at 250 yards. Time for a 30-06 or a 308 or something. So that's kind of the way I look at it. So I would go along with this idea of a 308 or comparable. And comparable would include the 7mm 08 Remington for sure. That's just a 308 neck down to 28. And the 260 Remington, same thing, only it's neck down to 26. And if you're going to go with that, slow it down by 100 feet per second, and you've got the 6.5 by 55 Swede. And I hate to say it, guys, but it's true, the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a great whitetail round, just as good as the 6.5 55, and just a little bit behind the 260. All of those are good. And the 240 Winchester is really good too. Of course, you're starting to get a little bit lighter and narrower bullets, but I've had so much good success so consistently with that thing that I can't argue against it. If anybody wants a little lighter rifle, less recoil, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I really can't tell you what is the greatest. Now, that 360 buckhammer is the equal to or slightly better than the 30-30. 35 Remington, buckhammer, 30-30, 32 special. I don't think you can really say one's better than the other, except for ammunition is going to be easier to find for the 30-30. But once you shot your deer, I don't see a heck of a lot of difference in those putting a deer down. It's not really a ballistic race. You're not looking at which one shoots the flattest. None of them shoot flat. So you'll do well with any of those. I would select that one based on the rifle that I liked, that you could get it chambered in. So good luck on picking that, Ron. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you just go out and buy yourself an XYZ rifle chambered for this and use that bullet and you'll be perfect, because plenty of people would tell me I'm full of it. Well, they tell me that anyway, so. All right, John in South Carolina. Mr. Spomer, I am a 20-plus year U.S. Army combat veteran, and I'm building my retirement rifle. Well, cool. Thanks for your service, and thanks for making it so retirement. I really clap you on the back for all of that. Now you're going to get your retirement rifle. This is interesting. I would like to put it in a nice walnut stock. Man, I'm right there with you. I got my retirement rifle last year in a walnut stock, didn't I, honey?
Yep. Thanks to me.
Thanks to Betsy. I got a single shot in 757 It's a falling block single shot from Park West Arms, SD10. I've got a lot of videos and things on it. I think I've got a blog or two on it on our website as well. Gorgeous rifle. Doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense because it costs a lot of money, but it's beautiful. And I was of that retirement age where I can splurge a little bit and get this dream rifle.
Hey, Ron,
What?
you're not retired.
Oh, you're not retired? I guess I'm not retired. I'm sitting here working right now. Now you get my drift. It's not like I have to go out at age 25 and get my first elk and my first moose and all. I can really relax, fall back, and just wait for that perfect shot. And the single shot works so well for that. Regardless, you are getting your retirement rifle, and you're like me, you want a walnut stock. I got a really fancy one, too. I figure if I'm going to carry it and look at it most of the day, it should be pretty. Kind of like my
Ron,
wife.
I got you that fancy walnut.
See, Betsy said, Ron is so used to looking at a beautiful woman that he's going to want a beautiful stock as well. Can't shortchange him on that, or you'll get a wandering eye. Well, it's worked out. Any rate, let's get back to poor John here. He's probably rolling his eyes at us. I really like the walnut stock with the black fore-end cap that is on your stainless Model 70 Winchester. Oh, yeah, that's another pretty one. Where did you get that stock and who made it? Thanks for your time, John. Boy, it seems like I've answered this question a couple of times before. I get a lot of requests on this. I've got a Model 70 30-06 been restocked, and the stock was a Bastogne walnut out of California, and there was a gentleman in Missouri who did it. He used to be the head shed at Pheasant. Pheasant used to make gun stocks, aftermarket gun stocks. And when Pheasant went under, this gentleman started doing it himself. I think he and his brother. And they found this good supply of walnut blanks out of California. And they had some really interesting grain in it. And they built me this stock to show off with and write articles on and all the rest of it. And it's been doing it ever since. I must have had this thing for, 25, 30 years now. So I don't know that they're still around or in business. I kind of doubt it, but that's what that was. So what you would want to do is to go to a custom gun maker or a stock builder, somebody who knows how to take a slab of wood like that and turn it into a rifle stock. Of course, Park West Arms does it because they make all their rifles from scratch. Everything. They make all the parts of them except for the barrels. They get those from whatever really you want. They have a few that they prefer, but whatever barrel you want, okay. Then they make the actions, and it's all American made using American steel, American parts, whatever. And then walnut, gorgeous walnut. They got a great stock of it, so you can really get some fancy stuff. But if you can find a local guy who kind of does it as a hobby, but there's a lot of folks like that out there, local gunsmiths who can really turn out a pretty rifle stock. And then you put that ebony fore-end tip on the end of it like you like, and whoo, you're going to have something pretty. So that's the best I can tell you. Let me think. You might check out Boyd's Gun Stock in Mitchell, South Dakota. They were making some fairly nice-looking walnut stocks here a year or two ago. They might still be doing that, and they might have a good supply of wood. You might want to check with them. And then another place you could probably check is at Midwest Gunworks. I think might have aftermarket stocks. They might know of some fancier walnut ones as well. And Brownells in Iowa, they've got a lot of aftermarket stocks, but the fancy walnuts are a little bit harder to find. But, yeah, do a little digging on that one, and I think you'll find something. Hey, good luck with it.
Hey, Ron,
Yeah.
I think we answered this question before, but I liked it so much, I may have put it back in.
Oh, ever since you ordered that fancy walnut stock for me, now you can just throw all the fancy walnut stock questions in here, don't you? Well, I'm happy with that. I always like folks who are still interested in the good old wooden stocks because they've been around for a long, long time. I don't know if these plastic ones are going to be around 100 years later like the walnuts have been. All right, let me think here. Oh, boy, it looks like somebody from Oregon. Zach. Hey, Ron, in recent years I have collected or inherited many different rifles in a variety of calibers, but I'm wanting to add something bigger to my collection, and I'm thinking about a .338 Winchester Magnum. but I could use some good rifle selections. While I mainly hunt in the thick Pacific Northwest, I still want to experiment and hunt abroad any chance I get. So what do you recommend? Thanks, and keep up the good work. Boy, you're on the right track with that 338 Win Mag. If you want to stick with a 338 but throttle it back a little bit, 338-06 off of the 30-06. And 338 Federal, that's a real sleeper. Doesn't get much love, but it is a great cartridge. I clocked an elk with one little raghorn bull, one shot down just like that. That's based off the 308 necked up. Pretty efficient cartridges, both of those. You can go to a 35 and get a 358 Winchester Magnum. That's the 308 necked up to 35. Great woods gun, closer range stuff, but good out to 250 yards or so. Then the 35 Whalen, which is the 30-06 necked up. Keeps your recoil down on all of those, and you still get the hard-hitting, larger diameter bullet kind of thing. And if you go much past, there's a 350, is it a 350 or 358 Norma Magnum? That's not real popular over here, but that's another option. And I think there's and that's probably just a Wildcat, the 350 Towsley Ultra Mag. That'll set your teeth back. My old friend Bryce Towsley likes a bigger thump at both ends, and you can get it with some of his Magnums. Golly, what else is out there? Anybody else got ideas for these bigger 338s, 335s? Oh, the 9.3 62, is it? That one is the 36 caliber, 3.366 inch diameter bullet. Real popular over in parts of Africa. It's kind of called the poor man's 375 H&H. It was a German make, and it's getting to be even more popular here. Pretty mild shooter for that big of a bullet going as fast as it does. I've got a video on that. You could look that one up, too. Those are some ideas for you out there, Zach. Good luck with whatever you get. Don in Wyoming. I don't have a question. I'm just letting you know that I enjoy your videos on YouTube. You give excellent advice on hunting and shooting. I became aware of the 7mm backcountry cartridge. I looked at your video with Joseph Von Benedict, and I noticed your excitement on the new cartridge. I was excited too. After careful research, I had my local store order a Weatherby Mark V Live Wild model in 7mm backcountry. I was looking for a lighter rifle, and this was it, 6 pounds without the scope. I'm going to have a Maven RS 1.2 to 2.5 to 15 by 44 put on that rifle. I plan to use it to elk hunt this fall. The Savage 110 I have is 11.5 pounds in 300 Winchester Magnum. This will be a lighter one for sure. I also will follow your advice on cleaning the barrel before going to the range and after shooting copper bullets. I watched your 30-6-week series where the groups were not so good. Then I saw the video where you discovered targets that Weatherby sent with the rifle, which were sub-MOA. So you went back and cleaned that rifle, and sure enough, it shot tight groups. I appreciate your knowledge and willingness to figure out a problem. Sincerely, Don. Yeah, Don, that sounds like you've got a great rifle there. Yeah, Weatherby was one of the first to start chambering for that 7mm backcountry. Hey, if you can do it, let me know how it groups for you, how it shoots, and all the rest of it. A lot of people have questions about whether that 7mm backcountry is going to be accurate. Now, the one that Joseph Von Benedict had he was getting some 3/4 inch groups. I shot it just 3 times because he didn't have much ammo, and I didn't want to burn it all up. But we didn't even measure it, but it just looked like I had 2 almost touching and then 1 out to make it maybe an MOA group, and I wasn't concentrating all that hard on really shooting a precise group like I should have. So I think they're going to be accurate, but we'll see. All right, David from Manitoba. When are you going to publish an addition to your 7mm book adding the 7mm backcountry cartridge? When it becomes Sammy or before? Well, it's become Sammy as I saw it was announced. So yeah, it's a Sammy spec cartridge. And I think a dozen different rifle companies are chambering for it already. So yeah, we got to get on that, Betsy. Betsy reminded me of this right after the SHOT Show, and then I got busy with other things and forgot. But we will get that added in, so the next shipment that comes in should have it, right?
Well, depends on how fast you write that. And
how fast I write it and how fast we sell these down. Buy now, guys, and then you'll have to buy again. No, you know what? How can we get this chapter to people? I know. Anyone who has the 7mm book, if you want the chapter on the new 7mm backcountry after I write it, I could email it to you. It's not like having it in the book, but at least you would have it. I could do that, right?
if we have all the email addresses.
Yeah, you'd have to send me an email address. They just go to Ron Spomer Outdoors
Whoa,
website.
whoa.
No?
Before you do that, let's think about this.
Let's think about this. All right, guys, we're going to think about it.
I think we can do it. Plus, also, what other book do you want Ron to write?
Oh, thanks, guys. Now she's going to make more work for me. That's what I need. Yeah, which one should I write next, guys? A cartridge book, like the 7mm? Should we do the 30s or the 6.5s? Which one? I'm thinking of doing the 30. Let me know. Great, more work, just what I needed. Last one, David from Ontario. Boy, we had a lot of Canada in here today. Hi, Ron and Betsy. I'm writing you from near Barrie, Ontario, Canada. I have been watching your YouTube channel and listening to podcasts as often as I can. Thanks for that, Dave. I thoroughly enjoy the content of your shows, and I truly appreciate your valuable stories, which are always value-packed with good information. I like this, Dave. Well, I'm not a young guy, but I am fast approaching 60. Now, that's pretty young from my perspective. Unfortunately, as I am not a hunter, I have to say I am aching to get out of the armchair and learn this hobby of hunting. Hey, that's pretty cool. I own a 1022 Ruger for plinking and practice, as well as a 270 Winchester that has yet to send a bullet down the barrel, as here, range time is almost impossible. So I need to get to a friend's farm to get to know this tool that I have purchased. My plan is to be in search of a whitetail next season here in my area. Thank you for your plethora of information on shot placement, field positioning, glassing. I have learned a lot from you, and I will now truly enjoy getting into the great outdoors with good friends and even have the chance of some fine meat for my freezer. Thank you for all you do. I shall keep enjoying everything you produce. Well, Dave, that is a great letter. I'm giving you comment of the week for that because, golly, a 60-year-old going hunting for the first time. That's the spirit, man. Go for it. We wish you the best of luck and all the joy that I have enjoyed over the years of being out there, one with nature. I've talked about this many, many times. It's always hard to articulate, but this feeling that I get when I am out there interacting with nature, whether I get a deer or not, just all the adventures and the discoveries that one finds out in nature, I don't know, it just buoys my spirit. I don't think I could live without it. I don't think I would have lived without it. So I hope you feel the same way. I think so, based on what you wrote us here. So comment of the week right there from Ontario, Canada. Best of luck. Let me know what happens after your deer season. Hey, guys, that's it for now on this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Keep sending in those questions and corrections. And for those of you who just have to chew me out, feel free. Sometimes I deserve it. We'll see if we can't put it online if you keep the bad words at a minimum. So until next time, thanks to everybody, especially Betsy back there for keeping me working instead of retiring. We'll see you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.